What time is it? It's nation time.
Greetings, Reverend Candia. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Dr. Chike?
I'm fine and enjoyed the talk that you presented. There were several things that caught my interest, particularly of note. Well, everything was, but you really deal with the idea that the strategy or strategy that we've employed, our historical narrative in relationship to the system, our arguments, have been flipped and used against us as we find ourselves in the place that we are today. And you also discussed the de-Africanization of the Bible, which I think was powerful. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so what I tried to do there was give folks a sense of where it started. And if you understand foundationally where the de-Africanization of Africa started, you'll have a sense of why we're dealing with the challenges around our faith and engaging our faith today. We have systematically bought into that de-Africanization, but and as if its origins aren't important. One of the ad libs I offered was respect to even how we refer to Jesus, particularly at the Shrines of the Black Madonna as a movement, referring to Jesus as the revolutionary Black Messiah Jesus, and how it's important for us to constantly remind our people, where Jesus comes from. He didn't come from Europe. He came from an African nation. He was born into an African nation, and the struggle was of an African people, and the decolorization of Jesus, was intentional, and so it's important for us to make certain that our people today understand, and for future generations to understand, that the history or the book of the Bible is our story, and we need to embrace it as our story as an African people.
Well, you say we need to make our people understand, and you do an excellent job, I think, of giving an original context of what you call the way and the revolutionary Black Messiah. To me, that seems like a very hard nut to crack. And I oftentimes in my classes, when I'm dealing with history, talk very similarly about how the former oppressors of the people that were Christians took the religion, the icons, and the Messiah himself and flipped it and made it a tool for the development of empire. So, and I'm baffled as to why is it so hard for us as a people to see this and understand what it is.
Well, if you think about it, Baba, it's been centuries of conditioning that is passed down from one generation to the next. And if you think about our church, while we do celebrate 72 years of our existence, over those 72 years, we've been trying to at least chip away at it for that time period, and reach as many people in that process to chip away. And we've had a number of successes along the way. Speaking of the way, we've had a number of successes along the way, but the struggle is a protracted struggle to really fight against the indoctrination because really that's what it is, right? Um, when you're perpetuating a lie over and over and trying to get folks to believe it as a matter of course, it is really an indoctrination of a people to believe that they are there is no connection or relationship that they have to um, in this case the book of the Bible, and that's it's important for us to continue to reinforce the fact that we are the living remnants of the lost African nation Israel.
Another point that I found very interesting, as I, observed and listened to and viewed the sermon, was how you remind us of Jeramogi Abebe's interpretation and analysis of power as
Mhm.
it relates to all of this. And if we go back to the example of Constantine and how they took this religion they formerly attacked, that was truly about building power. The one
Absolutely.
thing that Jeramogi Abebe gave us and it's continued with Jeramogi Kimathi is the importance of power, the importance of the idea that power resides in institutions that we need to build, and the fact that we're powerless in that sense. So that's super important, but why don't we get that as it pertains to religion?
Well, it's interesting. All of if we take a look at what we're going through today, it's no different than what was happening with Constantine, right? I mean, it's a constant struggle for power, and Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand, never has, never will, right? But that demand has to have the force that's greater than or equal to the power structure that exists. And so you talked about institution building, right? And so it's got to be, and I'll be more specific, it's got to be a counter institution when you're building power, right? Because the institutions that exist to oppress, the least of thee. And so we have to, in order to build power, we have to build the kind of counter institutions to the ones that exist. Um, for the liberation of our people who are largely oppressed in this current society. Um, Now, why don't we get that? You always if people buy into these terms uh, that power corrupts absolutely, right? Or absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we start, again, talk about conditioning, we start to buy into that as if power is a negative or bad thing. When in fact, power is nothing more than the ability to make something happen, to move something. But if you buy into this notion that it's corrupting, then you have a negative feeling around power. And I will tell you, anybody who will tell you that power is corrupting only wants to maintain power uh, over you. And so we have to reject, the definition or connotations that are offered with respect to power, and understand that we must build those power or those counter institutions that meet the needs of our people. And once we do that, and when we do that, you'll see a dramatic shift in power.
I like the concept of or how you develop the idea of the weaponization of government. And my immediate response was that the government has always been a weapon to
Hmm.
oppress Black people, our people. But historically, there have been times that we have been able to impact or sway the government in a way where it did things for us, like maybe Reconstruction or something like the Civil Rights Act. So those were instances where the government or the machinations of government, we were able to get them to work in our interest, or maybe the work that Thurgood Marshall and Charles Houseman did
Mm-hmm.
to get Brown versus Board of Education. And we find ourselves today where this is all being undone. And you make that point, you clearly make the point. I think you make a good analogy between what's happening today, how the Greeks and whatnot took all these things that were liberational for us, co-opted them and made them oppressive. We see that happen with the white Christian nationalists and them taking symbols and taking woke and anyhow, I could go on and on. As we near the end of our conversation, you have any thoughts that may speak to that?
Yeah. So what is interesting is, you know, the sort of stealing of, you know, or even erasing of our language and culture that we use for the purposes of liberation and seeking to make him a pejorative, if you would, and thus have us rejected altogether. I mean, you spoke of woke, right? I mean, what is the opposite? Us lacking consciousness, us being asleep at the wheel while things are happening around us. You know, so it's all done to disarm any efforts we might have to rise up for the purposes of our own self-determination, for the purposes of defining our own struggle, for the purposes of you know, self realization. And so, and if we buy into being woke as a pejorative, then they can continue to perpetuate, you know, the harm, perpetuate, you know, enslavement, perpetuate, you know, any abuses and atrocities that they have historically done against our people.
All right. Well, I appreciate you, your work and your commitment, and I look forward to your next sermon and continuing this conversation. Peace.
Mm-hmm.
What time is it? It's nation time.